What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and this was an odd one that just came across as I was just casually looking at magic items and different rarities, pining for things that my character might get someday from random loot rolls. And I came across an item that I was vaguely familiar with because I had given it to my players in one of my very original campaigns back in like 2014, 2015, and that is the Cube of Force. Now, it's a pretty interesting item, and it has the opportunity to really shut down a lot of damage that you could do as a DM to players. It basically is a nullifier of damage in so many words, and we're going to take a look at it. But let me tell you how shocked I was at the change for the 2024 version. Now, in one interview or something somewhere, I can't remember exactly where and when it was said, that Chris Perkins said that they had fixed the Cube of Force. And if you use fixed in the term of neutered, then that is correct. It was clunky before, and I think you'll see that when we take a look at it, but I just wanted to do I wasn't planning to do this video, but I feel like it's so different. It requires its own standalone video. So let's go ahead and dive in. By the way, if you like this kind of stuff or any of the kind of stuff I do here, consider subscribing. That number goes up and it makes me smile. And hey, it's singular click. You know the deal. Anyway, here is the 2014 version of the Cube of Force. Requires attunement. It's about an inch across, and each face has a distinct marking. It starts with 36 charges and gets a d20 charges back daily at dawn. You can use an action to press one of the cube's faces, expending a number of charges associated with it. We'll get to that in a second. Each face has a different effect. If the cube has insufficient charges remaining, nothing happens. Otherwise, a barrier of invisible force springs into existence, forming a cube 15 feet on each side. The barrier centered on you, the person holding the cube, moves with you and lasts for 1 minute until you use an action to press the cube's sixth face, or it runs out of charges. You can change the barrier's effect by pressing a different face and expending the charges, and so on. I think that all makes sense, right? We're all good with that. You hold the cube, you hit a button, it puts a 15-foot cube around you that moves with you, and you can change the number based on which side you press. And if you press the sixth one, it ends it, or if it runs out of charges, it ends. If your movement causes the barrier to come into contact with a solid object that can't pass through the cube, you can't move any closer to that object as long as the barrier remains, right? If there's a wall and you walk into the wall and it's going to stop at the wall and you won't be able to go through it. Makes sense, all right? Now here's what the different effects are based on the number of charges. So you have one face number one, you press it uses one of the 36 charges, and then gases, wind, and fog can't pass through the barrier. So you're making a cube around you to 15 feet, and that doesn't allow again, those things, gases, wind, or fog to pass through. So this could be good for things like, cloud kill is a gas, right? So that would stop it, things like that. If you press face 2 and use 2 charges, non-living matter can't pass through the barrier. Walls, floors, and ceilings can pass through at your discretion. So again, non-living matter, consider that could be anything like weapons, attacks and things, non-living things. I guess you could count undead in this as well, can't pass through it. And you can choose, again, we talked about that barrier, you can choose to have them pass through it if you want, that's your choice. Phase 3 uses 3 charges. Living matter can't pass through the barrier. Obviously, this is a 15-foot cube. This is huge for keeping enemies out, especially if they're an enemy that needs to get physically close to you to hit you with something. You can keep them 15 feet away. Phase 4 with 4 charges, spell effects can't pass through the barrier. That could be huge in determining your survivability, because letting spells not come through that barrier, if you're fighting against a wizard or something, you are essentially, they can't pass through it, which is just amazing. And you can obviously figure out how you want to tactically get in and out and have this work. And then phase 5, nothing can pass through the barrier. Walls, floors, ceilings can pass through at your discretion. So with 5 uses, by the way, of a 36 charge item, you can basically build yourself a 15-foot on all sides barrier against everything. And then again, obviously, you pick walls, floors, and ceilings as you see fit. Each activation of this is 1 minute. And then again, you can choose it moves with you. So consider how useful that will be to get through different things. And nothing can pass through, right? You could walk through lava or on top of lava 15 feet above it, just walk through it with the cube held out, and that'll be perfectly fine. And it'll stay there for a minute because literally nothing can enter into this. Now the only thing it doesn't, it says it springs into, 15-foot space around you. And then the only thing that it doesn't come out and fully specify is like, what if there are allies near you? So let's say I press it and I'm surrounded by my party. Can I bring my party inside that? I guess in theory, when I press the cube, it forms a 15-foot cube around me. If I say nothing can pass through the barrier, in theory, it should shunt them out, I would think. But if it springs into effect and they're already inside it, are they then good? Trapped inside it? This is part of the reason why you're seeing, why we heard there was confusion about it, as there's some things that just aren't spelled out. Now, I think the intention is that if it springs into existence 15 feet on a side and your party members are inside the cube, they get to maintain being inside the cube so that it kind of works as a barrier for your party. I believe that's the intention, but it's not clear. Arguments could be made either way. And then if we scroll down to the bottom, it says the cube loses charges when the barrier is targeted by certain spells or comes into contact with certain spell or magic item effects. And it talks about how many charges are lost. Disintegrate gets rid of a D12, Horn of Blasting a D10, Pass Wall a D6, Prismatic Spray a D20, and Wall of Fire a D4. So again, it lasts, as it says here, for a minute or until it runs out of charges. So if you do set up 5 charges to make the nothing barrier where nothing can come through it, enemies can still target your cube of force wall and try to just knock it down to the point where it has no charges. Again, Prismatic Spray is going to take off a D20. If they roll well, it could basically, with a couple of these, nullify your cube of force. Again, it's going to get a D20 charges back daily at dawn, so it's not destroyed. It's just rendered ineffectual and not useful for that period of time. So that's kind of a nice trade-off, that it's all powerful in some aspects, but it can be damaged. And some of those spells are lower level spells. Like Wall of Fire, I think, is what, a 4th level spell? So that's not bad. Horn of Blasting is obviously a magic item, but there are a variety of ways you can do this without having to have something like the Disintegrate spell prepared, which is the only way to shut down something like a Wall of Force, right? Wall of Force is shut down immediately with Disintegrate, but that's the only thing that works on it. And this, to some degree, the Cube of Force functions similar to a Wall of Force in its, how it works. But yeah, it was a little bit clunky, but it had a lot of uses, right? Again, if you were surrounded by a bunch of undead, you could do the only 2 charges and basically push them out and not have to worry about getting hit with siege weaponry or anything like that. Or, you wanted to push out any enemies, or, you're fighting a bunch of melee characters, knock them out with the Living Matter one, push them out, or you're fighting a bunch of spellcasters, keep spell effects out. It says it follows with you. Another thing that's kind of interesting is it doesn't say whether things inside can leave. Again, this goes around the whole concept of your party. If I put Living Matter can't pass through the barrier, then in theory, if my party's inside it, they can't go outside either because they're inside the barrier. They can't pass through it. But their weapons could, and their spells could. So you could see there's a lot of confusion as to how this could work exactly. And I think every DM probably rules this a little bit different. My personal ruling when I had it in my games is that if you were to generate it with your party nearby, they are contained within inside it, and then it kind of follows the effects that you chose, right? If you choose nothing can pass through the barrier, that goes both ways. Your party's not launching things out, and enemies aren't launching things in. If it says spell effects can't pass through the barrier, your spells can't go out, their spells can't come in. Living Matter, same kind of a thing. But obviously, you could see there's ways around this. If I say, hey, no spells can come through this, but arrows and things are perfectly fine based on that, because you can't like hit 2 sides of the cube and activate both sides. You basically choose the specific thing you want, or 5. Technically, with the 5 one saying nothing can pass through the barrier, Based on up above, gases, wind, and fog, in theory, air can't pass through the barrier either. So potentially, you're not going to have air beyond a minute, but it's only a minute, so hopefully the party can survive that. But you see what I'm saying? There's differences in how you can interpret this. Um, Either way, let's go ahead and look at how they fixed the cube of force in 2024. So, it starts now with 10 charges, gets a d6 charges back at dawn, and it just lets you cast spells. It just lets you cast a couple of spells out of it based on the number of charges. For one charge, you can cast Mage Armor. For another charge, you can cast Shield. For 3 charges, you can cast Leomund's Tiny Hut. For 4 charges, you can cast Mordenkainen's Private Sanctum. For 4 charges also, you can cast Odaluk's Resilient Sphere, and 5, you can cast Wall of Force. That's it. That is a drastic and wild change. Now, again, it doesn't have that concept of losing charges with attacks, but they're all going to function as per the spell. And then again, if you're casting the spell from within inside it, you're going to utilize the action associated with the spell. So Wall of Force is an action, and then you're fundamentally going to just use the Wall of Force spell. Unfortunately, also for this is all of these that require concentration are now bound by concentration. One of the benefits of the original Cube of Force was that it was a non-concentration, but it also wasn't considered a spell either. It was kind of its own unique thing. Yeah, I mean, whoever has it, it doesn't require attunement by a spellcaster, which is something nice. So you can give this to a non-spellcaster, and they do have access to this, right? Giving your fighter the Cube of Force does give them access to the shield spell now. You can use it to put mage armor on anybody that doesn't wear armor, right? If you have a wizard, a monk, and so on in the party, you can pop mage armor on everybody if you want to, or however you want to break that down. Again, nobody's going to be upset about access to Leomund's Tiny Hut if the party didn't have it before. That's a great way to keep the party alive and safe. Although, again, 2024 Leomund's Tiny Hut is a little bit different in that, I think it has a specific thing about spells. Spell levels of level 3 or lower can't be cast through it. Previously, it was basically impenetrable. Now, spells of 4th level or higher fire through the Leomund's Tiny Hut like it's nothing. And then again, we have Mordenkainen's Private Sanctum, a little bit different. We have the, Hamster Ball, Magic Hamster Ball of Odaluk's Resilient Sphere. And again, Wall of Force. Or like I said, just give it to your fighter and they have 10 uses of shield. Which, again, anybody who can cast spells from the Cube of Force can have access to the shield spell. Which only costs 1 charge, which means you have 10 per day. And there's no downside to burning through all of the charges. So in some aspects, yes, this is in fact cleaner than the Cube of Force from 2024, and in some instances it does replicate to some degree what those abilities could do. Wall of Force or, Odaluk's Resilient Sphere, Leomund's Tiny Hut, this concept of bubbles of force that things can't come through. It is similar in a lot of ways to how some of these effects can be used, but I feel like it really took the identity of the Cube of Force away completely and just made it a spell stick, which is fine, but we also have the introduction of things like inspelled weapons, inspelled armor, and inspelled staff, which basically just give you a series of charges to cast a certain spell out of it. And that is essentially very close to what this is, although, slightly different in their mechanicals of how they work, but yeah, I don't know. What do you think about this update to the Cube of Force? Like I said, it definitely, you can't argue that it's not cleaner. How it works is very clear. It lets you do the things that it says it lets you do, which removed some of the confusion. But again, it just feels like another item that gives you access to spells, although the benefit being that it's not tied. A spellcaster doesn't have to be the one using it. Anybody can use these spells. So, anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I'll see you all next time.